Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, a landscape and wildlife photographer based in Northern California. They say when it rains, it pours, and I think that's a pretty apt description for life in general. It certainly has been for me over the past couple years, but it's also been a really appropriate way to describe photography over the past month. It has been an exceptional opportunity and time of year to photograph in Northern California. We've had Aurora, we've had comets, we've had moon rises. And I want to just share with you a couple of the photos that I've taken over the past month, just in October, that have documented these natural phenomena. So the first stop in our journey is last week with the arrival of a geomagnetic storm. These storms originate at the surface of the sun and make their way across the solar system in the form of geomagnetic energy, impacting the Earth and our atmosphere and exciting atoms and molecules that result in different colors shown in our atmosphere. Colors ranging from magenta and pink and red to greens and blues to oranges. And it is just truly incredible if you have never experienced. And I had never experienced the Aurora, despite being a photographer for 20 years and originally, even before I was a photographer, being into astronomy. I'd never seen the Aurora until this year. I'd spent a week, actually 10 days in Iceland, and I wasn't able to see it until this year when weirdly a G5, a highest severity geomagnetic storm, hit Earth back this summer. I think it was May or August. And I happened to be in a very good spot in California. I was visiting with a friend who was celebrating her birthday in Ukiah, California, which is an agricultural area where there's very little light pollution. And I knew the Aurora was hitting. I didn't have high expectations. And I went out and saw one of the most amazing natural phenomena experiences I had ever experienced in my life. And it was very eye-opening and powerful. And I sound a little crazy saying it, but it really was an amazing experience and just really inspired me to get out more at night to do more astrophotography. And then when I heard that the G4 level storm might be hitting North America and we might be able to see it again in California, particularly with cameras this past week, I was just really excited and had to get out and see it. So I got the kids down for sleep and I went out around 8 o'clock and I didn't have any plan. I just drove north. Now, to see the Aurora, you need a couple things. Of course, you need a geomagnetic storm. And in our area, because we're not going to be hit by it right above us, we need a view of visibility towards the north. So we need a vantage point that can look north. And in addition, we need clear skies. And that actually is a bit of a challenge here in the Bay Area because of fog. So I kind of split the difference between the coast, where you might have more dark skies, but you have more fog, and inland, where you have a little bit more light pollution, but you have a drier climate. So I split the difference and I ended up at a place called Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Now, I'd never been to this place before and I kind of stumbled upon it after trying a couple other locations, but I am so glad that I went here because it is a wonderful spot to spot the Aurora in the future. My first shot was just to document the Aurora. You don't know what you're going to see on nights like these. And like I said, it's very unusual to even be able to spot it in Northern California. So I just wanted to get some keeper shots that were just documenting that I saw it and getting me out there and providing a deliverable to this little adventure. And this first shot was the first scene I saw. It was faint on the horizon. What I do when I'm shooting the Aurora, I've developed kind of a nice little format for this, is I take out my phone and I do a 3-second exposure on my iPhone, not as a keeper, but just to see if I can see the Aurora. Of course, you can spot it with your eye. You can see a little bit of color, but a long exposure is going to capture way more color because it's going to layer upon multiple seconds of information so that you can aggregate whatever color is out there. So the iPhone is a nice way to just pop out and see if you're going to be able to see the Aurora. I did get a good shot. I could see a really beautiful pink and purple Aurora with the blue sky behind it. So I took out the camera, set up the tripod, and I started to take pictures. And this was the first shot that I got. I like this shot because you have a little bit of the water in the foreground and it's reflecting a little bit of the aurora, which is something I didn't expect. And also I think the aurora itself kind of looks like a fire, like a smoke plume coming off a fire, which it's just a little bit of an unusual way to see it. It's not the pillars of light that I saw back in Ukiah, and it was unexpected to me. So I like this. It's documenting it, and it's opened my eyes to the idea of getting a reflection that I then implemented later. So I got back in the car and I just traveled a little bit further to see what other viewpoints we could find. And my second shot was intentional to try to figure out a good foreground. And I think the snaking of the river, of the water through the terrain creates a nice, interesting foreground that's captivating in addition to the aurora. I like the reflection here again. This is sort of what I now knew would happen and was something I was looking for. One of the frustrations I have with this image is it's just a little bit too narrow field of view. So I wish I had a little bit of a wider angle lens. This is with a 35 millimeter G Master f1.4 on the Sony a7R5. Wonderful combination. It was beneficial in a lot of ways, but it wasn't quite wide enough. One of the reasons why the f1.4 aperture was nice is by shooting wide open, it allowed me to keep the shutter speed to a level where I didn't have blurry stars. I wanted pinpoint stars. And so this image is around 8 or 10 seconds. And that was important to me to have a somewhat sharp, starry landscape. Also, it allows me to, of course, keep the ISO down. So I like this image. It's a keeper. I've printed it out actually, and I'll show you what it looks like. So here I've printed it out, and I'm really happy with the way this guy turned out. My third shot of the evening, I wanted to just focus on that reflection that I kept coming back to over the previous shot. So I found a turnoff. Actually, this was probably the most populated one that I found, and it was just a wide view of the lake with the aurora in the background. Now, the aurora was kind of chilling. It wasn't as powerful at this point as it was earlier in the night, and I think later in the night after I left, but it was sufficiently lit so that I could get this frame that I wanted, which was just a simple framing where you have the sky and the lake and the reflection of the aurora in the lake with a little bit of that contrasting with the yellowish dry grass that is the Northern California landscape right now. So I'm really happy with how this image turned out because of the reflection. I like the whole set, of course. In a technical sense, I think they were fairly well executed, maybe not perfect, but just the experience of seeing the aurora was so powerful, and it's just so much fun to get out there solo and to shoot natural phenomena like this on these particularly incredible days. So for our next astro adventure, we have the Comet. The Comet is named C 2023 A3 Suchishin, I think, maybe, kind of pronunciation, Atlas, because it was actually discovered by the Chinese and is initially named after them and then independently discovered by, I think, North American astronomers that just called it Atlas or whatever. So whatever, it's this amazing comet. Of course, these are just phenomenal things, and I had been spending the entire week explaining to my son, or trying to, about the idea that comets are leftover space dust and frozen elements from the creation of the solar system that have been just kind of whirling around for a while. So at the end of the week, we basically were like, we need to go out and try to see this thing. So we didn't go too far away from my home base in Berkeley. We went up into the Berkeley Hills to a place called the Lawrence Hall of Science, which has a nice viewpoint of the bay looking west. So this shot that I captured is really just documenting the fact that we saw the comet. I really like the gradient in the sky. I love that you can see the comet. I like that it goes from orange to blue. I think they're nice stars. It's kind of a nice framing. It's fine. It would have just been a lot more compelling image if I had in the foreground at the horizon the iconic, skyline of San Francisco rather than what we have here. So pretty good photo, fine. I'm grateful to have documented it. And I just captured another shot of the comet just to document it because I could get a close-up image. And perhaps most meaningful to me was the fact that I got to experience this with my kid. And so I printed out a photo of the comet for him to frame in his room and to just remember this new memory that we had formed together. So very grateful to have seen it and to have been able to experience that with my son. And the cherry on top of this Sunday of photography was the moonrise, specifically the October Hunter's Moonrise Supermoon. This is actually the largest supermoon that we got to experience the whole year, this calendar year. So that's pretty cool. And the supermoon was going to be biggest at sunrise. So as the moon was setting, or even before sunrise, I think around 4 in the morning. But I chose to photograph it the night before because sunset is a lot more easy for me to get out and have fun with photography than trying to wake up at 4 in the morning. So I shot it the night before, so it's not really as large as it could have been, but of course you have the benefit of shooting it at sunrise in those situations. And of course, the full moon always rises at sunset, so we always have that kind of lingering sunset light to shoot with. So I got on PhotoPills, which is my favorite app for planning these sorts of things, and I tried to find a location where I'd have the Golden Gate Bridge in the foreground and the full moon rising in the background. And that spot in this particular case ended up being Point Bonita Lighthouse, which is a lighthouse as part of the National Park Service, and it's protected and managed by them. It's actually a really cool spot to visit that I went with my kid to a while ago, but it's closed right now for renovations. And unfortunately, that meant I couldn't get quite out to the tip of that lighthouse where I wanted to shoot with the perfect framing, but I went as far as I possibly could, and I set up my tripod, and I had 2 cameras with me. I set up the A7R5 with the 135 millimeter that I mentioned before, and I shot 500 images to create a time-lapse video. It's the video that you saw at the beginning of this episode, and it is probably my best attempt so far to capture a time-lapse. So I basically pushed the shutter the second the moon was rising and breaking the horizon, and I let it go until the moon was out of the frame, and I shot 500 images raw, edited them and put them together in Lightroom and then Photoshop and Premiere so that I could make the time-lapse video. So if I had one critique on the time-lapse, it would be that the interval was too long. So when you have a 3-second interval, it means it's going to take a shot, wait 3 seconds, and shoot again. That means you're going to have fewer images than if you have a faster interval, but it also means that you're going to have less smooth movement when you have fast movement. And in this case, with the waves kind of crashing and moving in every image, I do think it distracts a little bit. So probably a 1-second interval would have been a better choice here. Yes, it would have resulted in 1,500 images instead of 500, but that's okay. So anyway, I took those photos with the A7R5 and made that time lapse, but I separately had my hands for handheld shooting Nikon Z8 and the 600mm PF, and I shot these images close up where I could get the moon framed with the Golden Gate Bridge, a much tighter shot. I could just capture detail on the moon and the Golden Gate Bridge for these complementary images that documented the scene. Initially, I was thinking I would shoot with the 1.4x teleconverter because the more focal length you use, the larger the moon will be in the frame vis-a-vis the other elements of your frame. But in this case, I realized that what I really needed was somebody or something on the horizon way far in the distance, on those hills, the Berkeley Hills, Oakland Hills, as the moon was rising. That would have been the shot where the moon would have been enormous in the frame. The Golden Gate Bridge was just a little bit too close to me to create that same effect. So rather than go for that effect, I just tried to document it with these close-up shots that brought a lot of feeling to it. And I even threw on a 20mm, a cheap 20mm Viltrox lens on the Nikon Z8 just to capture some wide-angle shots, and even shot a little bit with my iPhone. For one of these images, actually, the iPhone turned out to be one of the best images I got of the night, because it captures a more wide angle frame right as the moon was coming up and I was shooting the time lapse. And just maybe as an outro here, I'll share with you some images that I took with the Ricoh GR3X of a camping trip I took with my son down to Big Sur State Park. This is only the second time he's been camping. I'm trying now that he's 5 to introduce camping to him more so he can embrace it as he's older and isn't too afraid of it. So I'm going camping with him more often. And I didn't want this to be a photography trip, but I took the small little Ricoh camera just so I could document it and take some images of the fun adventure with him. So I'll leave you with that as an outro. And I appreciate you listening to me, seeing these images, and watching these videos. I've been really enjoying sharing my photography on all different platforms, and I'm looking forward to sharing more of it here on YouTube. So take care, be well, and please get outside and enjoy the natural beauty that is all around us. And hopefully November is as amazing as October was for nature photography. Take care. Bye.